This is a re-upload of a story I recorded last week. It wasn't up to YouTube censorship standards, so here is a reworked version of the story. This is primarily for archival reasons. I will still send this to my editor so they can add sound effects to it. Now I put in double the work. Anyways, I hope you still enjoy it, and let's get right into it. For glory, for Mondstadt, for freedom. This was one of the many war cries of the Knights of Avengers. While the City of Freedom hung lazily in the middle of Cider Lake these days, the city's war-ridden history was highly discussed and taught within the Knights' Order. It was important to understand why the Knights sacrificed their own freedom to lend it to their fellow citizens. Why you fought and died in the field. Being born into a noble family, you had refused that decadence early on, as you understood the need for the Knights' Order when your carriage was attacked by wild hilly churls. Upon joining the Knights, as soon as you could, your instructors beat the entitlement you are born with out of you. They formed you, honed you, strengthened you like a blade. And on your 20th birthday, you had joined their ranks. As a hunter. Subdivision of the Outrider Knights. While the Outriders' jobs simply was scouting, your goal and that of your fellow hunters was explore, discover, and eliminate. Of course, publicly you were still referred to as an Outrider, as the existence of the Hunters Division was a secret to the open public, and only reserved for the strongest men and women of the Knights of Avengers. But sadly, this was a thing of the past for you. After your devotion to the cause, the church, and most importantly, the people of Mondstadt, you had been tasked by acting Grandmaster Jean herself with Bard duty, as she called it. It was a simple and strange job. Inside Mondstadt's walls lived a certain Bard, who lived his life in perfect accordance to the teachings of Lord Barbados, the Animal Archon and God of Freedom. So Bard duty meant you had to make sure he wasn't making a fool of himself, wouldn't drink himself into a coma, and as Jean put it, prevent him from talking, whatever that meant. Originally, this was supposed to be just temporary, and that Jean's former partner and rumored fiancé, Diluc Winter, who was currently on a mission with the Honorary Knight, would soon return and then continue his own Bard duty. Days had already turned to weeks, which then would soon turn to months. Your days were boring and quiet. You yearned to return to your fellow hunters. Every night when you returned to the barracks and watched as slowly your comrades amongst them returned, covered in blood of the abyss and showing off trophies, it filled you with a strange hatred for the Bard, for Jean who put you up on this, and of course, your fellow hunters, who despite not being malicious in their boasting to the other knights, were still rubbing salt into your wounds. At least, something was about to happen tonight. Something that would change your outlook on things. It was late at night, and you had left the barracks to avoid a fellow hunter who had ripped out the heart of an Abyss Herald to show it off, and to pick up the Bard at the Angel's Share Tavern. The streets of the city were empty, save for a few hoodlums and drunkards, but they hardly bothered you, At least not until you reach the titular tavern. Venti the Bard was lying in a puddle of wine on the bar table. "There you are," shouted a very angry barkeeper. "Where have you been?" You looked away out of shame and just approached the feminine boy. "How much is on the tap this time?" you growled. "Paid for it with his performance today. But he's a nuisance. Can't close the bar with a customer still in the building." Without another word, you picked up the bard and threw him on your shoulder. Venti coughed as he slammed onto your hard body, but that didn't seem to wake him up. Acting Grandmaster Jean had provided him with a home in the upper quarters of Mondstadt, so that had become your target for now. You grunted as you ascended the 100 steps to the upper level. Venti's abode was located next to the Grand Goth Hotel, and by now you are used to the amused looks you got from the fatuis inside. With a growl, you entered Venti's home. It was sparsely decorated, filled with empty wine bottles and scattered clothes, but other than that, it was at least dust-free. "Thanks," he said as soon as the door closed behind you. So the little rat had been awake after all. With a rage-filled groan, you threw him onto the ground. "Oh, hey!" he complained. But he was already smiling at you. "That hurt!" You scoffed and were about to leave when suddenly he took hold of your boots. Wait, he begged. You looked down at him. "What do you want, Bart?" He had completely wrapped himself around your foot. "Drink with me." "I think you had enough." The Bard laughed wholeheartedly at that. "What? I bet I can still drink you under the table." You tried to ignore him and took a step forward, only for him to make himself heavier. "I'm not letting you go until you agree." "What do I get when I win?" you asked. He smirked in response. "I won't drink tomorrow." You huffed. "Not good enough." "I won't drink for a week." You bit your lower lip. "Think about it. An entire week where you don't have to babysit me." His hands crawled up your inner thigh, making you blush ever so slightly. Flustered, you kicked him off of you. "Fine," you barked. Annoyed, you sat down on one of the chairs in his dining room. 5 minutes later, you rolled in a barrel. "I've been saving this one." He was really exhausting himself, wasn't he? "You know, I could have carried that for you, right?" Venti giggled. "Why, yes." He gave you puppy eyes. "But I wanted to do it all by myself." Your eyes narrowed. "Why do you always act so adorable, cute, lovable, immature around me?" He took a step back and dramatically sighed. "Oh, I'm offended." He paused. "So are you going to help me lift this onto the table or not?" With a smirk, you replied. "What was this do-it-by-myself thing you just talked about?" He blushed before attempting to lift the barrel. His butt raised up in the air, he grunted as he tried to lift it. Bored, you leaned onto the table. "Just a minute," he huffed. "Almost done." You rolled your eyes and got up, took the barrel in both hands and swung it onto the table with a loud whomp. Venti was out of breath. Well, you barely broke a sweat. "By the way," He huffed as he crawled towards the chair. "If I win, I get to lick your muscles." You blushed hard, your entire body freezing. What? What's with that reaction? If you know you're going to win, it doesn't matter what I get to do as the victor, right? He grabbed 2 tankards, giving you one of them. "I saved this wine for months. Got it as a reward for my participation in the Storm Terror crisis." You raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Was that why you got this treatment from the knights?" He cranked open the barrel's handle and filled his tankard with wine. It was a bit foamy. Without another word, and smirking from ear to ear, he immediately emptied his glass. "Your turn," he hummed. Together, the two of you downed drink after drink, and he matched you shot for shot. Despite enjoying large parties in the Favonius quarters, you were quickly reaching your limit. Not just with the alcohol, but also with the immense amounts of liquid that started to accumulate in your gut. You had noticed that your stomach was already ever so slightly bulging. You got a lot of determination, Miss Knight, he hummed. You were breathing out of your mouth to catch as much air as possible. Your brain was foggy, limbs heavy, and your body hot like fresh embers. But for some reason, your stomach didn't hurt, as if some divine power prevented you from feeling sick. But whatever it wasn't protecting your head. So dizzy. You could barely see straight as you filled your tankard once more. It was already the second barrel. With a sad whimper, you thought of the amounts of wine you drank with your fellow knights. Sometimes you and your comrades would induce vomiting outside just to go back in to drink even more. But you knew that Venti wouldn't let you get away with that. As you put the glass to your lips, you kicked back your head to let the liquid run down your throat. However, you put too much strength into the move. In your dizzy state, you could no longer muster up the necessary balance. As you threw yourself backwards, crashing onto the ground, covering your face, hair, and clothes in sticky red wine. The hit knocked you out for a few seconds. But you knew that you had lost. Venti stood above you with a grin that would have made your blood boil if you weren't knocked out cold. "I won, Miss Knight." Yeah. The next day you awoke with a seething headache. You had many mornings like this, so you were used to it. But usually your body wasn't sore after a night of drinking. You looked around yourself. Wait, this wasn't the barracks. Your memories were foggy at best. Then something warm snaked around your arm as you were about to stand up. Whatever it was strong enough to push you back into a lying position. With shock, your eyes landed on the sleeping form of Venti the Bard. And all the dirty memories of last night came back. At least he had the courtesy to not force himself onto you. But your pride made yourself follow through with his commands, and with a scowl you had endured all the weird requests he was giving you. It was safe to say he did much more than licking your muscles. You blushed hard, hating the fact that you enjoyed it. and your toes curled up at the images your brain was producing. Especially when you remembered how your body reacted, and how your body was acting now. Ever since you had become a hunter, you had been treated and acted like a knight. However, last night, you were treated like a woman. And you absolutely loved it. You sighed, both in disappointment in yourself and faint happiness. Without waking him up, you rolled over and wrapped your muscly arms around the bard's tiny frame. Such a godly lover like him would probably never ever appear before you, so might as well enjoy it for as long as you can.